Alright guys, it is Mrs. Humanek and I want to talk about linear functions in our Unit 3. We're going to do a review before our test, alright, next week. So in Unit 3, one of the big things that we talk about is slope, alright, and slope is the steepness of a line. We can also talk about it as the rate of change, or when we're looking for it on a graph, we can talk about it as rise over run, or when we're looking at it on a table, we can say that it is the change in y over our change in x, all right? And our slope formula is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 and x sub 1, and that is, of course, when we have two lovely points that we would label x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. So we need at least 2 points to find the slope, and we're going to need that whether it's on a graph, on a table, or just as points. Now, there are two main equations that we covered in our Unit 3, and the first one is slope-intercept form, all right? Now, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, right? And this covers m is going to be our slope, and b is going to be our y-intercept, hence the name slope-intercept form. Now, here's the deal. Our slope will always be the coefficient to our x. So even if this was in a different order, like y equals b plus mx, the slope, will always be attached to our x. It will always be the coefficient. And remember, our y-intercept is when x is equal to 0, and it can be written as a point as 0, y. So the x will always be 0 at the y-intercept because it's where it crosses through that y-axis. And then the last equation that we covered in this unit was point-slope form. And point-slope form is y minus y sub 1, or our y-coordinate that they give us, times m, which is still our slope, times x minus x sub 1, which is the x-coordinate they give us. And when we use this equation is when we are given our slope and a point, hence the name point-slope form. So if we are given just a random point that's not necessarily the y-intercept and our slope, then we would use point-slope form. So we're going to go ahead and get started on our review so that we can get ready. So you can download this from our page, or we can just go ahead and get started. So in a problem like this, we want to write our linear equation given the following information. On number 1, we want to go ahead and write it in slope-intercept form. So we need to find our y-intercept, and we need to find our slope. Well, our y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. So we want to go ahead and look on our table, and we see that that's right here at 0, 8. All right, y'all? So that's right there at 0, 8. So that would be our y-intercept, which means that our b would be equal to 8 when we actually write our equation. And our slope, we can find a few different ways. On a table, I like to do this by my change in my y over my change in my x. So to get from 2 to 5, we add 3. To get from -4 to -2, we add 2. So the change in our y, that's that little triangle, the delta, it means change, delta y over delta x is going to be 3 over 2. And so that will be equal to our m. So if we have our m and we have our b, we can go ahead and write our equation. And so we have y equals m, which in this case is 3 over 2, x plus 8. And that would be our answer for number 1. If we switch over here to number 2, it's asking for it in point-slope form from a table. So when we're looking at this, we need a point, and guess what? You can pick any point on this table. For mine, I am going to pick this point. I'm just going to pick the bottom point, -2 and +6. And in this case, my -2 is my x, my +6 is my y. So I'm going to write my point as -2, 6. My slope, we need to figure out the same way we figured out on the first one. We're going to do our change in our y, which is +2, over our change in our x, which is going to be +4. Yes. And then, so that means our change in our y over our change in our x is going to be 2/4. So that means our slope is 2/4. So now that we have a point and we have a slope, we can go ahead and write this out in point-slope form. Now, what I want you guys to see is our point, we have an x point at -2 and a y point at 6. So we're going to go ahead and plug this into our point-slope equation. So how we would plug this in is we are going to say y minus my y1, which is 6, is equal to our slope, which was, not 2/4, silly Mrs. Humanek. Our slope would actually reduce down to 1/2, wouldn't it? It would simplify to 1/2. All right, so it would be 1/2 times x minus my x1, which was -2. So that means our final equation will look like y minus 6 equals 1/2 times x plus 2. So our final equation is going to look like that. Y minus 6 equals 1/2 x plus 2. And you notice that the signs flip here. So my 6 is my y point, and it was y minus 6. My x was -2, and it goes x plus 2. So it always flips there in your final equation. And so, but technically you could have used any of these points and still gotten a good answer for your point-slope form. I just picked the last one. All right, so now we're going to jump down to number 3. And when we're looking at number 3, what we see is we are given 2 different points and our slope here. And so we want to go ahead and find our y-intercept and our slope. Well, remember, we said that our y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. So it gives us our y-intercept. That's awesome. So that is 0, -3. So that means that b, in this case, is going to be equal to -3. So that's wonderful. But we still have to find our slope. So you can do this a few different ways. Okay? One way that I think is easy is you can go ahead and make a table. Another way is to go ahead and use that slope formula where it was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're going to do that really quick. So my y2 would be -1 minus my x2, which was, my y1, which was -3, over my x2, which is 2, minus 0, my x1. So that would give us -1 minus -3, that's really plus 3, right? So the 2 top positives turn into, and 2 negatives turn into a positive. So -1 plus 3 will give me 2. 2 minus 0 will also give me 2. So our slope would be equal to 1 in this case. So 1 is equal to our m. Now, when I said put it in a table, this is actually also a really nice way to do this. And so what I want to show you guys is you can also find your slope by just making a table. So if I wanted to make a table really quick, I would say x and y, 0, -3, and 2, -1. And then you just find it this way. You say, oh, that's plus 2, and that's plus 2. So you can find your slope by saying the change in your y, which is 2, over your change in your x, which is also 2. So you end up getting 2/2 again, which is great. So your change in your y over your change in your x is 2/2, which is still equal to 1. So when we write our equation, we would say, all right, y equals 1x, because that's our slope. Oh, not plus 3. We're going to say minus 3, because it was the y-intercept of -3. So that means that we have y equals x minus 3 as our final little answer here. All right? Now on here, on number 4, it's giving us 2 points, but this time it wants us to do it in point-slope form. So how we're going to do this is, first, we are going to use, well, we can use either point for this guy right here, all right? So I'll just pick this first one, okay? So we're going to say our x is -2, and our y is 7, okay? And in order to find, so that's our point that I'll pick, in order to find our slope, but you could have used 4, 4 just as easily. So if you want to find your slope, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and make a table. So I'm going to say x and y, -2 and 7, 4 and 4. When we do this, we get -3. Ooh. When you do this, you get +6. From -2 to +4, we add 6. So the change in our y over the change in our x gives me -3/6, which would reduce down to -1/2. So that is equal to our m, which is wonderful. So if we're going to go ahead and plug this into our point-slope equation, we're going to say y minus my y sub 1, which is 7, is equal to my slope, which is -1/2, times my x minus my x sub 1, which is -2. And those two negatives will turn it into a positive. So we are going to have, once again, y minus 7 equals -1/2 x plus 2. So our final point-slope form will be this guy right here. Y minus 7 equals -1/2 times x plus 2. All right, next we have this guy right here. So our this one is very nice. It gives us our point, 0, 1, which is going to be our y-intercept because x is equal to 0. All right, so that means our b in this case is equal to 1. It gives us our slope right here, which is 2/3. So this is a super nice one. We can just say y is equal to 2/3 x plus 1. Woo, sorry, kind of cut it off there. But y equals 2/3 x plus 1. All right, number 6 is kind of nice too here. We have our point, which just gives us that point, and we see that -4 is our x, and -1 is our y, and our slope right there is going to be equal to 3. So when we plug these into an equation, into this lovely equation, we're going to say y minus my y sub 1, which is -1, equals slope, which is -3, times x minus x sub 1, which is -4. So when we actually write this as our final equation, we're going to say y plus 1, because 2 negatives make a positive, equals -3 times x plus 4. So our final answer will be right here. And once again, we see that the signs have flipped. Our y in our point was -1, and now it's y plus 1. Our y in our point, our x in our point was -4, and now it's x plus 4. So this is how you would write your slope-intercept form. All right, so moving on, we are going to look at number 7. All right. So these are if we are given this following situation. So what you want to do is you want to circle those important numbers. So we're going to read through it. A climber is on a hike. After 2 hours, he is at an altitude of 400 feet. After 6 hours, he is at an altitude of 600 feet. And we are looking for what is the rate of change. Well, we know rate of change is another fancy word for slope. And remember, when we have slope, if we have our change in our y over our change in our x is always time. All right, guys? Our x is always going to be time. And so, always. So in this case, our time is going to be hours, and our altitude is going to be and our y is going to be that feet. So in this case, it looks like we are given 2 points. After 2 hours, he's at 400 feet. So if we're going to make this into a table, at 2 hours, he's at 400 feet. And at 6 hours, he's at 700 feet. So we want to find our rate of change. We are looking for our slope. So let's see here, the difference here. 400 to 700 would be plus 300. And then 2 to 6 would be plus 4. So this means that our rate of change, feet per hours, would be 300 divided by 4, which would give us 75, and that's going to be feet per hour. So the altitude change in this case is going to be 75 feet per hour. All right, and it looks like he is going up, right? Because he's going from 400 to 700, so it's a positive slope right there. All right, if we look at this number 8 here, we see what is the rate of change of the distance with respect to the altitude. So what we're going to do is we can do this a few different ways. We can make a table, we can count up and see what our difference is here. But rate of change, once again, what we're going to be looking for, that's kind of a key word, we're going to be looking for that slope. So we're going to do our change in our y over the change in our x. Our y is our distance, or the miles, and our x is going to be our time, or the hours. It's kind of looking funny. So if we do this, we see that would be miles per hour is what we have here. So we need to look for some points. So these points are nice and picked out for us. And so we see that this point is what, 280, and this point up here is at 160. So I say we just make a table. So if we do our x and our y's, we say 280 and 160. And what we have is plus 80 plus 2. So yeah, that delta y over that delta x is going to be 80 over 2. And so that would be 40, wow, miles per hour. That's crazy. And altitude, this must be like not a person, all right? This must be some sort of vehicle. Okay, all right. So that is how we found those two. We just wanted to look for the rate of change. It was just asking for the slope on those. All right, for number 9, it says you opened an account with $400 and you deposited $20 per month. So those numbers seem important, and we want to write an equation. So we opened an account with $400, and then we deposit $20 per month. So it looks like, hold on just a second. All right, guys, so I'm sorry, I had to take a little break. So we open an account for $400, you deposit $20 per month. So what we see right here is this word problem gives us a starting point. And our starting point is always going to be that y-intercept. So where we start, if you have a starting point, that will be your y-intercept where your x will be equal to 0. So that means it would be at 0, 400. So because we have a y-intercept, I would use slope-intercept form in this case. All right? And so when we use slope-intercept form, this is great because it'll help us. We know that we're going to use that b, so we already have our b, which is 400. So all we need to be looking for is our slope now. Because if you guys remember, slope-intercept form is that y equals mx plus b. So we want to go ahead and this is the equation that we're going to be looking for. So now we need to think about our slope. Now our slope is going to be our rate, right? This looks like a rate of change over here. $20 per month. So if I'm depositing $20 per month, it looks like I'm adding, right? I'm increasing, which is kind of nice. And so we know that that's going to be a plus. That deposit means plus, right? So my rate, or my slope, or my M, whatever you want to call it, would be your change in your Y over your change in your X. Well, in this case, we're thinking this is money per month, because remember, time is always X. So our X will always be on the bottom. So in this case, this would be money per month. So we would be right here at $20 per month. So our slope would be right there at the 20. So if we had to write our equation, Y equals M, which is 20x plus 400. All right, so we get this lovely guy right here would be your answer. For number 10, we see that you've been losing weight. That gives you a hint that it's going to be a negative at a rate, that's our slope, y'all, of 2 pounds per week on your new healthy eating plan. Wow, that's a lot. You are in week 6 of your new plan, and you currently weigh 200 pounds. Okay, so what it looks like we are getting right here is we are getting our slope. We're being given our slope, which is awesome because we got our rate, but we're also being given a point. This is going to be a point, right? Because this tells us at week 6, I still weigh 200 pounds. So in this case, guys, our slope, or our M, would be 2 pounds per 1 week, or just 2. And our point would be 6 on week 6. They still weigh 200 pounds, okay? So remember, our time is this X right here, which means the pounds that we weigh is our Y. So if we have a slope and we have a point, we're going to put this in our point slope form, all right? And remember, this is Y minus Y sub 1 equals M times X minus X sub 1. So remember our slope and our X point and our Y point, and we're going to plug all these beautiful numbers in. So we get Y minus Y sub 1, which was 200, equals M, which is 2, times X minus X sub 1, which was our 6. So it looks like this is already simplified really wonderfully and beautifully, so we can just be done right there. All right, now, so this would be our final equation for number 10. Y minus 200 equals 2 times X minus 6. So now we're going to look up here, and we're going to use the graph to complete the following. So what does our X, these are good questions. What does the X-intercept represent? Well, the X-intercept represents where our X crosses 0. So right there, we see that it would be at 6, 0. So our X-intercept, the Y is always equal to 0 at the X-intercept. Well, our Y in this case is by the amount of air. So basically, this represents the minutes when the air is equal to 0. Okay? So what does our Y-intercept represent? Well, let's see here. It's going to be over here. It's 0, 40. Remember, our Y-intercept always happens when Y is equal to 0. When X is equal to 0, my bad. So it always happens when your X is equal to 0. So basically, what this represents for us is when my time is equal to 0. So this is how much air you have when your X is equal to 0, or your time or your minutes is equal to 0. All right? So that's what that represents. What does this point represent? 320. Well, remember, our X values are the minutes. Our y values, if we look over here at the graph, is the amount of error, right? So this means at 3 minutes, we have 20, and what is that? Cubic feet. So if we want to write an equation to represent this, to represent the situation, well, let's look over at the graph. What kind of equation do we want to use? Well, we are given our y-intercept. So if we have our y-intercept, I would use slope-intercept form, all right? Y equals mx plus b, because that's the easiest one. So what we got to do is we got to find that slope, and we got to find that y-intercept. Well, we know that our y-intercept is equal to, what is that, 0, 40, because we already talked about it up here. So that means our b will be equal to 40. So we have the first part of this equation. Now we just need to find our slope. So if we're finding our slope, what I would do is I would make a table, you guys. So we have 2 points. We've already picked a couple. You could even pick that one if you wanted, the little 320. But we have our x-intercept and our y-intercept, so I'm going to pick those. So we have x and y. And we have, let's see here, when x is 0, y is 40. And then our point here, x is 6. My y is 0. So what we have right here is we're going to go down to negative 40. Our change in our y. Our change in our x is plus 6. So the change in y over the change in x is equal to negative 40 over 6. Ooh. And if we reduce that, that would be reduced to negative 20 over 3. So now that would be our slope. Gosh, sorry, this is a little messy. And that would be our y-intercept. So if we wanted to write it in y equals mx plus b form, what we do is we'd go over here and we'd say y equals m, which is negative 20 over 3, x plus my b, which is plus 40. So our final answer would be y equals negative 20 thirds x plus 40. All right, we're going to keep on trucking. Only got a few left. Okay, so now we want to graph the following. So if we're going to graph this following, we're going to do, so we have an equation like this. This gives us our slope-intercept form, and we can easily rewrite this equation as y equals 2x plus 3. And here we see that our slope is our coefficient of our x. So our m, or our slope, is equal to 2. If we wanted to write it as a fraction, we could write that as 2 over 1. Okay? And then we also see that our y-intercept is right here at 3. So we're going to say, and it's a positive 3. So we're going to say 0, 3. So once you have your y-intercept and you have your slope, you can graph. You begin with your slope, your b, and that's 0, 3. And then we move with our slope, move with your m. So begin with b, move with m. So we go up 1, 2, we go over 1, up 1, 2, over 1, up 1, 2, over 1. Our rise over our run. And then what you want to do is you want to take a straight edge and you're going to go ahead and make that lovely line. I will use this little ruler. You can use anything that's straight. You can use the side of your ID. You can do something like that. And we're going to go ahead and do our little line. So this is what our beautiful line would end up looking like. All right. So once we have this, sorry, got a little distracted here. So once we have this, we see that that would be our line. So our slope was 2 over 1, which is rise over run. Okay, so now if we want to write an equation of the line on the graph in slope-intercept form, first we need to find the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is 50, so that's 0, 50. And our slope, we can make a table, you can count. I personally, when the numbers are all a little wonky, it's not like even 1, 2, 3, it's nice on this side, on the X, but it's not really over here, so I would make a table. So I would say X and Y, I'm just gonna write down that line, and we're gonna say, okay, 1.050, and then my next point would be 150, isn't that? 150. And now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to see, okay, that's plus 100 plus 1. So the change in my y over the change in my x would be 100 over 1. So that means my slope is simply just 100. So if we have our y-intercept, which is 50, and we have our slope, which is 100, we can easily put this into y equals mx plus b. So we get y equals m, which is our slope, 100x plus b, which is 50. All right, y'all? So that is how we find the equation there. So now we're going to graph this if we are given point slope. So when we're given point slope, we're going to go ahead and see what our numbers are here. So honestly, I think the easiest thing to pull out first is your slope. So look for that. So your slope is 2, or if we're going to be graphing, you can say it's 2 over 1, right? Now, in order to find our point, we have to remember the whole like sign flipping deal, all right? So we have this -4 and this +3. So when we pull it out, we got to remember to flip that sign. So our x value, since it's x minus 4, our x point is going to be +4. And since our y value, it's y plus 3, our y value is going to be -3. Sorry, that looks a little funny. So now that we have a point and we have a slope, we can go ahead and graph it. So I'm going to graph my point for it first. So I'm going to say 4, -3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So that would be my starting point. That's where I start from. Now I'm going to move with my m. I'm going to move with my slope. So I go up 1, 2, over 1. 1, 2, over 1. Let's just do one more. 1, 2, over 1. My slope is increasing. My line sure looks like it's going to be increasing. So we are good to go. So I'll go ahead and do this. And we have it, a nice, beautiful line. And that is what number 15 will look like. All right, number 16. We're going to go ahead and write the equation of the line on the graph in point slope form. So what you're going to be doing is we need to pick a point, any point. Honestly, it really isn't a huge deal. So I'm going to pick that 6, 4. All right. So my point that I picked is 6, 4. You could have easily picked 10, 14. All right. But we do need to find our slope. So in order to find our slope, what I would do is I would go ahead and make a lovely table, x versus y. So we have 6, 4, and 10, 14. What we see here is our change in our y is plus 10. Our change in our x is plus 4. So if we write that change in y over change in x, that's going to be 10 over 4, which will reduce down to 5/2. So our slope, or our m, will be 5 over 2. So now that we have our point, and we see that our x point is 6, and our y point is 4, and our slope is 2, we can easily write our equation from our point slope. We start off and we say y minus my y value, which is 4, equals m, which is my slope, parentheses, x minus my x value, which is +6. So now we don't have to simplify it any further, and this would be the equation for our line. All right, y'all, we are narrowing in on the last couple here. So we are going to be looking at this. Number 17. Which of the following is not a correct representation of the function shown in the table below? So we have this lovely table here, and what we see, okay, first of all, yours, this should be a minus. We're going to fix that on C. That should not be a plus, it should be a minus. Hopefully yours was correct. On the one that you downloaded, if I passed it out in class, it said plus, so we had to correct it to minus, all right? Or else there are 2 wrong answers, and it doesn't make any sense. So what I suggest doing is that you actually find the point for this line, all right, or for in each problem. Because check it out, if you see, they all have the exact same slope of 3. So since they all have the same slope of 3, the slope is not what's different. What's different are these little points here. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and find these points. So my point on this first one, my x value would be -1, my y value would be +9. And check it out. That's our first point in the table, so that one works. Okay, so on this guy, our point would be +1 and +15, because we got to switch those values, and look at that. That's our second point on the table, so that one works. And then on this one, now that we've changed it, gives you a point, and it gives you +2 and +18, and it means that's a point. That makes me feel like this one is not going to be on the line if our first 3 were, but let's double check. Our x value would be -9 and +1, and nope, that does not work. That is nowhere on this table. So -1,9 is on the table, 115 is on the table, 218 is also on the table, but 9,1 is not. And since it said which one is not, our correct answer in this case would be D. All right, so basically you find the points from the equation and you see if any of them are on that table. All right, now last question. Which graph matches this equation? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to see, ooh, this is in point-slope form, and we see that our slope in this case is equal to -2, and it gives you a hint. It says eliminate the positive and negative slope choices first. All right, so let's see here. If our slope is -2, that means it has to be decreasing. So this guy, C, cannot be the right answer. Neither can B down here, right? Because those are both positive slopes. We're looking at negative slopes, all right? So it's either got to be this A or this D. So what we need to do next is we need to graph the point. So let's see what the point is in this equation. Well, our x value is, oops, it's going to be over here, all right? Our x value is going to be over here. Our y value is going to be over here. My bad. All right, so our x value would be at, let's see here. If we have a +1, that means our x value is at a -1. And our point, since it was -3, so the point that we're looking for is -1, +3. So our x is -1 and our y is +3. So we're going to go ahead and graph this on each of these. So on A, if we graph -1, +3, that's not on this line. So that means this one can't be it. If we go down here and we graph our point, we see -1, +3. And yay, it fits the graph. And look at that, our slope is down 2/1. So our slope is -2, and it goes through the point -1, 3. So that means D is the answer. All right. So I know this was a little bit long, but I hope that it helps you as you get ready for your test this coming week. All right, we got this. Bye.